I would now like to invite Mr. Aparup Sengupta to share his pearl of wisdom with us.
Okay, very good morning. It's wonderful to see bright young faces. I have my personal yoga trainer who comes and sees me on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays. And I cancelled mine, but I don't regret because I had my little mini session, so which was wonderful. And starting a day with a little bit of peace and tranquility always helps. And in this world order, which is chaotic with very less attention span, I think these are the required tools and methodologies that not only India, the entire world is going to adopt. And I'm sure when you hear mindfulness being an integral part of Google's management programs, you can clearly understand that people are fed up with the outside. So there is a need for embarking on a journey inside. So inside means I, and many I's means we, and therefore we matter, right? And I was just trying to compare the notes with Saurabh to calibrate what the meanings of W and E stands for. And he once again clarified it's to do with W means well-being and E means engagement. This is the start, and I thought that when I used to take my leadership sessions and people used to ask me, what is success, what is experience, can you define, and some of the questions were very silly. How can I become good? It's like, how do I eat a laddu? Just put it in your mouth and taste it. So some things you can't have a how. But many a times we try and massage things to extract a model, whereas there is no model. I mean, there is just a natural self that works. And today I think the world is sitting up and trying to figure out as to what is this whole idea of employees, customers and shareholders. I remember long ago I started this whole initiative of coming up with indices of happy customers and happy people and happy shareholders, and try to measure them and try to figure out what exactly are those scorecards. And then when you go back, since Prashant said that about CEOs who are really bothered about the shareholder value, let's try and understand what is a balance sheet. Balance sheet has two parts: assets and liabilities. So what are assets? Plant and machinery, tables, chairs. What are people? No, they are liabilities in the balance sheet. Isn't it funny? So the entire economic measure, the EPS, the scorecard, the stock market, everything that you measure is based on your P&L and balance sheet. And where do the employees sit? In payroll liabilities. So very interesting. So we have to figure out a way, how do we bring these people who are sitting in the balance sheet as liabilities into assets? So therefore, we need to figure out that I work for a good company or I work for a profitable company to I work for a happy company. So that is becoming the world order, and at a national level, it has already started with this direct correlation with a happiness of a nation to the economic prosperity of that nation. So similarly, an organization that has happy people, which includes employees, managers, leaders and everything put together, becomes a great successful organization. And by success, it need not necessarily be that you have to be within the top two. I go back taking this inspiration of how to build a happy company to my heritage, which is India. And when I was designing the organization, I know it has come from 13 layers to 5 layers, I gave a challenge to organization. Can we have an organization which has 3 layers, which is borrowed from the wisdom of our Indian culture and family values, which is you have grandparents, parents and children. Am I right? That's an ecosystem of a family. I mean, you can have great-grandfather with the mortality level is 95 years, suffering, whatever. So I'm not going there. But primarily 3 layers exist in an organization, which is the family system in India. And if you look at that, it has sustained for 5,000 years. We don't have a social security. The family system serves as a social security. So a poor mama is suffering in hospital, the relatives will figure out a way to collect money and pour in. So it's not the government who is funding that. So that's the kind of economic and social system that we came up with. And in fact, it was a presentation and I heard somewhere in the US, they said that you have a very sustainable social security system, which is your family system, which survives and has lasted for more than 5,000 years. Whereas the maximum number of companies that has survived is probably 100 years, is you can count it in fingers. So therefore, we are standing on a very proud heritage. And how do we bring those elements of values into an organization? It's a disruptive thinking. So what is the thinking? One is that you have to figure out a way to take people from liabilities to assets. The financial guys will not allow you to do that. So you start preparing your own balance sheet, where your asset block is your customers and people. And your liabilities or your expense block is moments of truth, negative or positive. So the more negative thoughts that you have, you keep on, maybe this whole chatbot is extracting negative emotions, it is subtracting that, and all the positive experiences that is happening is also being trapped. A summation or a sigma of that too basically gives you an idea of what this is all about. So now, coming back to this whole idea of, I'm just leaving these thoughts behind as to how do you create a happiness balance sheet. I will tell you a story. When I was trying to do my research on this whole idea of happiness, I landed up with a very interesting professor. Most of you would have heard of him, called Sir Martin Seligman. He is in the University of Pennsylvania, and he has been teaching for the last 3 decades positive psychology. And he's very famous, and he came up with a seminal research that talks of the law of diminishing returns, of how a human being becomes happy in life. So it starts with pleasure, the primordial thing of happiness. That means I go after pleasurable things, instant gratifications, and so on and so forth. For instance, you love ice cream, so you would love the second one. The third one is okay. The fourth, and if I tell you the sixth, you will puke. Am I right? So there is a law of diminishing return on pleasure. And then he figured out, so if I have to now do an experiment, he actually did an experiment with his class. And on a sudden day, he said, this is a bus, we'll go somewhere. And lo and behold, the students didn't realize what's happening. They were taken to a movie. And they watched a movie, had popcorn, and came back. After a year and a half, he says, guys, we are going somewhere else. Somebody says, are we going for a movie? No. So the bus again was there. They were taken to an orphanage. And the bus was stuffed with a lot of toys and food and snacks and so on and so forth. And they were all distributed, and then they came back. Some of them had some great time. They played, they had joy. And then finally they came back. So then after 3 years, when he carried out a survey and was asking questions about these two experiences, the one that remained was the one in the orphanage, because that was very organic in nature. It had a lot of moments of truth which were very happy for the people, and the retention levels were high as 80%. And the first one, many people didn't even remember the name of the movie. So therefore, when you allocate a budget for employee engagement and carry events, it lands up in that first category of movies. So how can you create most lasting impressions in the organization, and that will basically drive what I think Prashant's research comes out is intentions of the leaders, intentions of the managers. So how do you create intent? So that is a thought that I would like to leave behind all of you, is that it is important to create a sense of intent to create a happy organization. So therefore, if you have to create a happy organization, you have to think of structure, you have to probably disband the structure, you have to kill the structure, you have to bring back the ideal of family and bring it back in the organization. I always say when people came back to me on designations, I said, in your home, do you have an executive brother and a junior sister or a deputy Masi? You don't have that, am I right? I mean, a Masi is a Masi, it depends, it's a loving relationship. can you bring that love back in the enterprise? Because let's do that. We are spending almost 60 to 70% of our awakened hours in the workplace. So if you do not bring that element of love, we will keep on having this treadmill of boring, attrition, going back, coming back, going there. So let's bring that whole family values. And this calls for a PhD research as to how do you bring those models into an enterprise level. How do you come up with the happiness balance sheet? How do you do that? These are all research work that one can actually embark on. You as practitioners can participate in the research, which can lead to a PhD thesis and dissertation. And I can guarantee you that it's important. Because end of the day, I found the sad part of HR was people on a very limited pond with a bunch of dolphins and sharks and HR team on lifeboats to save people if they drown. And some of those were in connivance with the sharks. Because he is also figuring out that otherwise the shark will puncture his lifeboat and he's going to drown. So from that paradigm to somebody who's enabling and seeing that how can the employees be happy, let's try to change the pond. Change the pond and ask the sharks that, are you a shark or are you our father? Are you our grandfather in the organization? So if somebody who's in HR or a team leader, sir or madam, are you our mother or are you another shark or you're a playful dolphin? Let's go and ask those questions and find out how do we bring those stylistic change in behavior in an organization that starts with this whole idea that Martin Seligman worked on of pleasure, engagement, relationship and meaning and accomplishment. He gave that name, gave it a name called the PERMA model. Pleasure, engagement, relationship, meaning, accomplishment. मैंने बोला ये तो इंडिया में पुराना मॉडल है, प्रेमा, लव, ये तो पहले से ही था, ये क्या है? तो हम करते हैं ना. Let's bring back love in the organization. Let's go back and build that organization where you jump up every morning in the bed, the way you take your bag from your college and want to go back to home. Doesn't matter whether you have poverty or whether you have money or whether you have a car, you don't have a car or what have you. You want to go back home, am I right? Go back to that ecosystem. So how can you create that organization that goes back to that organization and remembers? Do you remember any employment engagement activity in your schools that there was a budget that was given? But you still remember those fond good old days, isn't it? You want to go to that alumni program, 25th year, 20th year. How can we create alumni in your organization? How is the alumni becoming stronger? Talks of that, whether that organization is moving into a sense of a family bonding, of a cohort that you feel very proud to be with. That's why you have companies like McKinsey and others have alumni websites, they have alumni email IDs and so on and so forth. Here in full and final checkbox, tuck, 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 email cut. Am I right? We do all of that in full and final checklist. So let's bring love back. So going back to Martin Seligman's model, which was PERMA, I thought let's do PREMA. Let's bring love back in the organization. And with that thought, there's a lot of stuff that I have said in terms of in a small speech, but each of them can be developed and deliberated upon to create models and create something new thinking that will be born out of India. With that, I wish you all the best and thank you very much.